The reason owners get stuck is because they don't understand the trade-off and aren't willing to make it, and don't understand how that trade-off shifts over time.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey there. Welcome to The New Rules with Alan Pentz, where we help you navigate today's chaos with precision. Your host, Alan Pentz, has 25 years of experience working in business and government, and he knows how the old rules have fallen apart. Each episode, we'll explore how to thrive in this new landscape by mastering the new rules while everyone else is still figuring them out. Let's dive in.
All right, we are back with the Small Business Black Holes podcast from the Owner Institute, here with the lovely Tonya Berenson, coming live from equally lovely San Cugat, Spain. How are you this morning?
I'm doing good. Well, it's afternoon for me, so yeah.
Apologize for the different environment behind me.
It looks a little yellow back there, but it's not about your background. It's about what you're going to say.
So this week we're going to talk about what? Black holes?
Black holes. Yeah. I mean, we've been touching on this for the past couple of weeks, but I think like a little bit more in depth.
Well, yeah, some of the companies I've been coaching recently, I'm seeing it, particularly for some of the smaller ones. So I do some coaching through a nonprofit here in DC for smaller companies and, about 1 million or just over. And really seeing this phenomenon when you get into that first black hole at about 1 million, or, it's obviously 20, 30% either way, or can be a little bit more, a little bit less. But you get people where the owner has successfully sold some work. And by that point, you're most likely selling past anything that you personally do as an owner. So if it's a professional services business, you have to bring on other people to help service clients at that point. And product-based businesses, I mean, you've gotten some level of product market fit where people are actually starting to use it who aren't like pilot customers or your people So you're kind of emerging. Yeah, it's the first time you're emerging from being like, having a job where you happen to pay yourself into a real business.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm seeing it over and over again where people get stuck at that point is that the owner's in everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're in like every box in the organization, from finance and admin to recruiting, hiring, employee management, to operations, to sales, to marketing, to running the organization. Sometimes cleaning is not involved. That's not in my assessment, actually. So
it's not one of the questions, but
maybe I need to update the assessment. Are you providing cleaning services for your company? That's definitely the first thing we want to outsource. But yeah, it's a really hard time. And I was in it myself, that this is a while ago for me, but you kind of get into this damned if you do, damned if you don't situation where you don't really have enough time to scale the business. And really at this point, scaling is just all about marketing and sales. Like that's it. Doesn't really matter. Some cases I actually say, don't even worry about, I hate to say this, and I don't 100% mean it, but like, don't even worry about how profitable the work is. Just get work, right?
Just
so you
get
have volume going through, but obviously get more profitable work than less, right?
What's the revenue we are talking about? I mean, it differs from business to business, but generally speaking, somebody were to
$1 million, 2 million. And that. Yeah, just under 1 million up to about 2 is usually where you see this. If you get past the 3 or 4, now you're in a different issue, right? You're hitting the next black hole. But this one is really about getting the owner out of that first level of stuff. So I use that metaphor about the orange and the rind, right? So the orange is the sales and marketing. It's the fruit you want, and the rind is all the stuff you're doing around the bitter rind of stuff that's distracting you from doing that. And what you really see is it's like a cost, capability, all these issues come up because it's a big risk hiring people. I recommend first you go and take anything completely admin off your plate. So that's the easiest stuff to outsource. So, right, you're sending out invoices, you're cleaning, you're, doing anything like filling out the CRM, or you're actually doing the marketing steps, those kind of things. You can outsource that stuff, scheduling, customer service, all that kind of stuff. So that's the first thing, right? And then that's only going to get you so far. And really where I think most time gets eaten up is in actual delivery to customers. And so that's a harder one to outsource, but I think it's the next place you have to go. And so that requires hiring someone of a little bit higher skill level so you can trust them with customers. And that comes in with the risk, right?
That's
so now
scary.
I'm committing.
How scary is that?
Right. I'm not just hiring a virtual assistant for $10 an hour. I'm hiring, somebody who make 80, 100,000, 150. It depends on your kind of business, what you need to do, but it's a lot bigger commitment. And I tell people, here's the deal, which sucks. This is the first this sucks lesson about business and why you end up making more money is because you can't look at the person who's coming in to help maybe take on customer delivery or whatever it is in your world, right? You can't look at them as their 12-month salary coming out of your bank account all at once. You got to look at it as month by month. So I'm going to try this person for 3 to 6 months. So that's what I'm allocating. And the problem you run into here, why people get stuck, is they hire the wrong person. They make up, things don't start working. They kind of know it, but they say, oh, well, we didn't train them well enough. We didn't do this. We didn't do that. I mean, there's 1,000 excuses you can make for why somebody isn't working out. And some of them are even true, right? If you train this person, if you dedicated time and worked with them over a year, they could do the job, but you don't have that time.
But you don't have that luxury of time, right?
Right. So you can't have somebody who isn't contributing from really the first couple of weeks. And so it's a really tough lesson to learn that you've got to make the tough decision and you got to take the risk to hire people and you got to make the tough decision to move them on if they're not working.
Yeah.
And you might have to do that a couple of times before you hit it, right? So what I see is a couple of errors, right? So I got somebody right now looking at their assessment. Would I enthusiastically rehire all my current employees? No. Okay, I know what the problem is. You have an employee or one or more employees that are a problem, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is I'm completely strung out. I can't find any time. I'm working nights and weekends. I would rehire all my employees, but what I'm going to find there is I'm not taking the risk on a bigger hire because, I like my current employees, but I'm not paying the money to get the person that can really get me out of that nights and weekends. So those, it's a spectrum of issues and it always comes down to people. A little bit to systems.
And how hard is it for people to fire people, right?
Very difficult, right?
I mean, most people wouldn't find that enjoyable, but especially for a new business owner.
Yeah. So I'd say take the process seriously, right? So a lot of times we're looking for a friend or someone we know and we just want to get somebody in a spot. What I really recommend especially for a hire that's going to be a higher level, and, that's the first time you're going to look at that. First of all, if there's ways to fractionalize it, you don't have to pay all the cost up front. That's great. That can sit other problems, so with people being available and dedicated. But go through a real roles and responsibilities exercise. So sit down. You can use ChatGPT. It works well, or DeepSeek or whatever you want. If you want a Chinese flair on it, right? But really think about, I love there's a guy, John Cipher, I interviewed last year sometime, and he has a book called Output Thinking, which I really agree with. And really think about what are the outputs and outcomes you want from that position. It's I want a happy customer who gives, 5 out of 5 ratings or 10 out of 10, whatever scale you're using, and renews, and this person does blah, 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 blah. And really think about the outputs and outcomes you want. And then build the position to that.
Yeah.
And then I highly recommend using some kind of personality survey, like a Colby or a DISC or Criterion Corp, or, there are a bunch of them.
Are these surveys you pay for or that anybody can?
Yeah, you're going to have to pay $50 or something to get somebody to take it. But, you don't have to give it to every single person that applies. You give it to the people you think might be a fit. And really think about what are the attributes. Take it yourself first, right? So what are the attributes of successful people? This gets easier when you've hired more people. So then you can kind of pattern match the personality types that are good for you and work in your business. You probably haven't done that yet, but try to think about the position look at your type. Are you the right type for that position, or what modifications would you make? Often I find some of the first hires here need to have a different profile to round out the owner, right? So if you're really visionary, and you move fast, you might need someone who's a little more deliberate and detail-oriented to round you up.
So you don't want to clone yourselves usually?
Sometimes it depends. I mean, I think when you're trying to do these first positions where you're going to stay in sales and marketing and vision, that, quick start, visionary, blah, 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 that's great. So you don't want to hire that person. Later on down the road, when you are moving into different roles as an owner, you might need to hire people like you to help supplement you. But at this point, yeah, I would say it's probably the opposite to some extent. I mean, not completely, right? But yeah, so use that as a guide. Be like, what aspects of the company are getting short shrift from me, right? Maybe it's detail orientation. Maybe it's too much detail. Usually it's lack of detail orientation, but
usually, not always.
Not always, but owners tend to be, like people who bootstrap a company tend to be salespeople, right? Mm-hmm. Not always, but a lot of times. Or they're, they just good at delivering whatever service or product they've developed. And if they get to a couple $1,000,000, they're obviously good at selling it. So, so it's kind of by default, it's an outcome-based thing. So yeah, like take some time on that process to design the role and really go in, like there's a bunch of hiring techniques out there. I don't think any of them are perfect, but you can take some notes from Top Grading, which is a big book. It's a very comprehensive interview process. I think probably so comprehensive that it's not usable by most companies in the modern environment because it's just too much interviewing. People just leave and get another job. But for certain positions, it can work. And part of their spiel is like really go position by position on their resume and ask that what they specifically did and what happened as a result, and ask them and be like, their big thing is threaten, if it's not, it's not positive language, it's like threaten the reference check or whatever it is. So say like, when I talk to your boss at this company, what will he say was the reason you left?
Oh, that's the worst question. No, it's a good question. But
so I think sometimes that's a little much and people can get pissed off at that and stuff. But the point being like, you have to go in there and you have to ask some challenging questions. Like, what would someone who worked with you at this position say that you did? We are going to, and you can imply that you're going to check reference. I think getting too threatening is like, maybe that worked in the 80s when there were fewer, unemployment was higher, but like, I don't see how it works today.
It goes a little further than strengths and what's your strength? What's your weakness? It's it's like an updated version of that.
But really get into like what they've done. Right. Yeah. And particularly like emphasize those outcomes and outputs you're looking for and push them on how those were created other places. Right. And the thing is, at this point, you are not going to get an A player who can go from running your company, helping you do something at $1 or $2 million to like 10 million. The person's going to have to just be good enough to get you selling more. That's the other thing. You can't afford someone who's way more experienced, and it's hard to hit on somebody like that. If they are that great and that experienced, why are they working for you, right? So you're going to get 85% of what you want, and that's got to be enough to get you over the hump to sell more. And this is the whole point of the owner's journey, is like, you're going to have to make compromises and trade-offs along the way. Like I said, like another person I saw recently, way too much process, $1.5 million business, processes out the wazoo. I'm like, dude, you're spending all your time developing processes and not selling enough, right? You need to go sell stuff. Then you'll get chaos and then you need processes, but like spending too much time up front, it's just not worth it. It's it's great and all, but like, I'd rather you sold another $500K at work, right? So at some point that won't be true.
So is this all during the chaos zone? You mentioned like there's the chaos zone and what happens during the chaos zone, as you call it.
Yeah. So I really think this is like the second bucket. Like the first bucket is what I call bootstrapping, which is really getting past having a job where you happen to pay yourself. And then you move into the second bucket where you're selling more, but it's not always chaos in the sense of like, oh, there's so much work and we can't handle it. That kind of happens a little later. It's more like we're not getting enough stuff in the door, but I'm still overwhelmed because I'm doing everything else, right? And I wouldn't say it's chaotic in the sense of like balls are getting dropped and clients are leaving because they're not getting what they want. That's not happening yet. That happens later when the hub and spoke system for the owner breaks down. That's more like 4, plus.
Yeah.
3 to 5, somewhere in there. At this stage, it's more like the owner's burning out. They're keeping everything running, and the owner's super capable. But we're starting to push up against their personal ability to do everything with just some admin help, right? So they've got to get something else in there. It's not going to be their great management hire that's going to be amazing. It's going to be a good enough person who can take enough of the admin and then client delivery operation stuff off their back so they can sell and market more. So I'd say it's chaos in a way, but it's more like personal stress versus like, I think from a client perspective, they would be fine. They'd be like, hey, or a customer, they'd be like, hey, business is doing what it should.
Like the back office is a mess or something.
Right. But it's more like the owner stressing out all the time and not like the business is breaking down.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when they successfully sell a lot more and they have that 85% solution as their only like real person who's able to do something a little more, that's when balls start getting dropped. Because now the sales are coming in. The owner can't personally be involved in everything anymore. The way at this stage at 1 to 1.5, 2, they can usually be involved in everything, even though they're working nights and weekends. But that just gets, by the time you get to like 3 or 4 million, you've now doubled the volume. And the owner now starts dropping balls, or the business in general. And that's when you need to go and be like, does that 85% solution work anymore? Does that 85% solution need to go into another part of the business or a more specific part? And now I have more money. Now I can actually hire someone for 150 instead of 85 or whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
And so at that stage, then you got to upgrade everything. And so the point I'm always trying to get people to see is like, in the words of the famous economist Thomas Sowell, there are no solutions. There are only trade-offs. And like those trade-offs change over time. And you got to keep, the reason owners get stuck is because they don't understand the trade-off and aren't willing to make it, and don't understand how that trade-off shifts over time. They make a trade-off to get to 2 million, but then they don't make the trade-offs they need to get to 5, right? And that's different people, different systems, different role for the owner.
Do you find people are resistant to that idea? Have you met clients and coaches that are like, well, no, that's not going to happen with me?
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, it's less that they don't acknowledge that the trade-offs exist. It's more that they just don't want to make them. So it'll be like your cousin works in the business, so you don't want to put him in a different role or fire him. Okay. Right. So you just don't want to face up to that, but okay.
You don't want to fire cousin Vinny, right?
Right. I call him cousin Jimmy, but whatever. But cousin Jimmy needs to go, right? And like, my only thing is to hold up the mirror and say, this is what's stopping you right now, okay? So go to cousin Jimmy and be like, man, if you weren't here, I'd have $3 million more, but you're worth making $500K a year. So, whatever. Those are the kind of things that you get is like people just, look, I don't want to be flip. I want to be sympathetic. I get it. I had multiple problems firing people. They weren't family members, but it's what's holding you back, right? So it's more, the resistance, I think, is, it's the kind of thing when you tell somebody, they realize it's true, but it's like one of those things that's like simple, but not easy, right? So it's like, it's very simple to say, you need to do X, Y, Z, and here are the problems. It's very hard to like go overturn your business and take the risks and put the money on the table and potentially lose it. I mean, that's the thing. Like when I'm telling people, hey, you're going to have to go spend more to get a better employee, I tell them, I cannot guarantee you that money will be spent well. I mean, you might screw it up and lose some money and have to go back and start over.
But the alternative is, right?
You just stuck, right? Until the alternative is you keep doing what you're doing until you can't do it anymore. And that can go on for a long time. A lot of people can sustain that effort and they just don't do anything, but eventually it'll catch up to them.
So people get stuck there for years, right? That can happen.
I mean,
for years.
If you look at,
in years,
and in our entrepreneurially days that we do that's the nonprofit I coach in, we show a graphic every session about how many companies get to certain revenue levels. And it's like shocking, like only 4, and I don't know where we got the site for this. It must be some census data, and the data is all over the place. So it's really hard, but just say this is directionally correct, right? It's like there are 28 million small businesses in the country. And some of those are like somebody's boat that's in an LLC. So all right, take out a good third, 40% of them, right? Let's say out of that, 4% ever make $1 million in revenue in a year. And so astronomically small amount. So say that's like $1 million, or maybe it's a little less than that, given that you have the boat LLCs. And then when you go past that, only, I think it's 0.4% get to 5 million.
0.4?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't have the slide in front of me, but it's either 0.4 or 0.04. It's like really small. So it's like 10 times fewer get through to 5 million. And then when you get above 10, it's like, it's in the tens of thousands, like 20, I think we quote 27,000 businesses ever get past 10 in a year.
Level.
So like, out of the beginning of say, 14 million or something like that, or 15 million, whatever you want to call it. That's incredibly small number. And so why is that? Well, it's these steps, and they don't get over the steps.
The black hole.
So the black hole. So I would say like getting to 1 million is an accomplishment, right? I don't call below that a black hole. I call that like, you just have a job and you're doing it. And so that's cool. I no shame, right? A lot of people bill, or sell $500,000-$700,000 a year, make good money, they're happy, great. But you don't really have a business, right? You have a job that you pay yourself. So when you get over that million, right, now you're in that 4%. That's very rare. But think about, only a fraction of those people are ever going to get over 5. So why is that? And it's like the owner just keeps doing what they're doing, and they don't spend more time selling. And if they're not selling anything, they don't revise their offer or their product, right? Their service or their product, because it doesn't have good product or service market fit. They don't hire the support so they can sell more. They don't then hire someone to help, deal with the chaos when they do sell more. And then they don't make the right management hires. They hang on to people and so you see it at every stage. And it's almost always like, the other thing I always see is like, $1 million to 2 million, the problem is not cousin Jimmy. Cousin Jimmy really comes in at like 5 to 10. That's when like cousin Jimmy is a problem.
He's hanging on. Yeah.
Well, cousin Jimmy has a major role usually. I mean, look, if cousin Jimmy is like answering phones in the front office, I mean, who cares, right? But if cousin Jimmy is like running finance and you're having trouble like modeling and predicting and forecasting and holding to budgets, it's going to be a problem, right? Yeah. So the problem usually comes in that larger revenue area where they're now managing a part of the business, and that part of the business is not working.
And you don't know where the money is. Cousin Jimmy is managing the finances, and you just don't know where the money's going.
That's right. And cousin Jimmy doesn't have to be a cousin too. I mean, I had cousin Jimmys who are long-term people I'd worked with and known, and they just, the role grew out of them, right?
Yeah.
Really hard to fire. But that's the reality. That's why only 27,000 businesses get to 10 million. In a year, right? So,
and what's interesting is you see this stuff, across. It doesn't matter what the business is.
Yeah,
right.
It really doesn't matter. It could manifest slightly differently, like in a manufacturing or a product company, or like a software company can be a little different sometimes in different aspects, but not really. I mean, it's usually all the same problem. The only real difference we talked about before is like venture funded. If you have venture funding, you can throw money at problems, and you can hire people who are better than the size of the company because you have money, right? So I can hire, like that first hire when I'm $1 million to $1.5 million, and I can only pay $65K. Well, now I got venture funding. Now I can pay $125, and I can do that when I'm $1 million, right? Yeah. So that's what the funding gives you. Now, I think a lot of people end up wasting all that money, and they don't hire the right people, and because they're raising money, and maybe they're growing. And part of it is like, hey, look, if you can grow and you're wasting money on all those people, at least if you have a few that are good, you can keep growing, and maybe you can grow out of that problem. But like somebody who is bootstrapping and self-funding just doesn't have that luxury, right? Yeah. And the reality is that venture capital money better get you to a really large revenue size in a short period of time, because you're just giving up all your equity in the business, which is what's the point? Like I know I have lots of friends who have grown like awesome SaaS companies and fundraised away a lot of their equity. And so they're going to sell for 100 and 150 million and walk away with 5 to 10 million after 10, 15 years. That's not a small amount of money. No one's crying a river, but like the company's selling for 150 million and you're watching away as the owner who started it blood, sweat, and tears with very little in comparison. And like, you know, you can start a regular old Main Street business and grow it to make a few million in EBITDA and sell it for the same amount and make money on the way, get paid more on the way, and with a lot less stress. So like, you better make sure that company is going to either sell for 100 million real quick with 1 or 2 rounds, or you better get it to 500 million or $1 billion. So that 5 or 10% you come out with is worth something.
Oh.
So that's the trade-off, I say. And like, I had someone very early on when I was like, all service company, like all professional services people, like have SaaS envy. So we all try to,
we do.
SaaS being software as a service. Yeah. We all have SaaS envy. And then the SaaS people, they don't really have professional service revenue envy, but they do love like the fact that it just comes in and it comes in bigger chunks. They love that. But then they realize it's not worth, and they're not going to get 10 times on it. So it's usually one way. And most professional services business owners try to build a product at some point in their career, and they almost always fail. Totally different business model, but
we try to build the SaaS.
Yeah, they try to build some kind of software product. Yeah. And it's a totally different. I've seen people do it and do it well, but it's really hard. And you kind of have to create, it almost has to either be the company or you have to create a separate company and put it in it. Because all the rhythms, this is a separate topic, but like the whole financial structure and compensation structure of a professional services business is completely different than the SaaS structure. So basically what you end up doing is rating all your profit. And the profit can continue to subsidize a product with bad product market fit. So you're just like, oh, if we put in a couple hundred more K, we can really we'll get it there and people will buy it. Versus like in a SaaS company, yeah, you might raise some money and put it into the product. But if the product revenue itself isn't growing, you're going to get cut off or shut down, because even if you're selling professional services, because the VCs are going to be like, I don't want that freaking
you cut your losses earlier.
Right. Because you're having to focus on the thing. That's the goal, right? So anyway, that's what the problem is with them.
You see that a lot. You know, companies like, oh, just a little bit more and we may get there. Is that's a black hole in and of itself.
That's a different kind of black hole. That's like,
it's a different, right?
That's like the boat black hole, right? Or a boat's a hole in the water that you pour money into, right?
Yeah.
So no, I've seen that multiple times, and I've done it myself. So fortunately, I cut myself off from spending too much before too long. And I might do it again here. So we'll see. So like I said, it's not impossible to do. It's just you got to be conscious of the trade-offs. As Thomas Sowell said.
The trade-offs.
Yeah. So I think real lesson from this one, though, just to kind of tie a bow on it, is this concept of trade-offs. The trade-offs change over time. So like if you're in a fast growth situation and you make a decision in 2024, by 2026, those decisions all have to be changed. So you can't just like make a decision and be like, all right, now we're good. Now it's if you're in a fast growth situation, it'll keep changing as you go. And understanding that probably the biggest issue you're going to have when you're smaller and growing is hiring the right people, getting good enough, and then realizing when good enough isn't good enough anymore and making the next move. And then pulling the trigger on failed experiments, be they people or SaaS products.
Yeah, and people can be a failed experiment. That's the hardest one.
100%. You are not hiring someone for 12 months. You're hiring them for 3 to 6. Keep that in mind. That's the investment.
Take note.
And you've got to hold yourself responsible to that investment.
Yeah, so, you have to have a hardness. It's like a hard shell that you entrepreneurs need, right?
Dude, I have some scars that aren't going away. And like, I laugh at that, but it's true. I mean, there are things I've had to do that, look, I'm not murdering anyone, and everybody's been fine, but it doesn't feel great. And sometimes I didn't set it up in the right way because I let it go too long, and then you got to do it all at once and it feels crappy. And like, that stuff sticks with you. So, there are costs to, having a thriving, great business that makes money. There are costs on the way.
Absolutely. But that's what you're trying to help other young business owners see and be aware of, which may blunt or not.
Or old, young, old, any age. Right.
Young, middle age, but.
Yeah, that's right. Cool. Well, thank you, Tonya. This has been fun.
Well, thank you, Alan. I'm always learning something. Hallelujah.
All right. Well, until next week.
All right.
That's it.
Then. Bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to The New Rules with Alan Pentz. For more insights on mastering the new game, follow @apentz, that's APENTZ, on X, and make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a single episode. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, in today's world, you don't follow the rules, you write them.